Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the MedTech Business Academy. Today, we have the Value Analysis Expert Series, another edition of the Value Analysis Expert Series. And I am very honored to be working with my esteemed guest and host today, Barbara Strain, Terri Nelson, Jenell Robinson. Ladies, how are you?
Great.
Wonderful.
Good. Wonderful.
Beautiful. So, today's topic is going to be about indirect spend and how indirect spend should be and indirect spend suppliers should be included into the value analysis process. Great news is I am equally as eager to learn what indirect spend is as anybody in our audience may also have. So, who would like to take a stab at a definition of indirect spend and help me understand what we're referring to?
I'm looking at Barbara.
Me too.
Well, I guess
This is the Brady Bunch thing. There we go.
I know.
There we
Yeah. The oldest first. Yeah. Anyway. Well, we've all been chatting about it for the last 10 or 15 minutes here, and we all have a little bit different viewpoint. Jenell said this as well, and I started out by saying, just think about as clinical is what we normally think of as value analysis handles all that. And that's, our real direct spend, like any other business, you're looking at what that is. And that for us is the clinical. But the indirect spend is all the other spend that helps to support the whole organization to make the clinical all work together. So it's a variety of things, but I'll just say it's like, think of purchase services or facilities, and we'll talk more about all these types of subjects or things. So I'll throw it to my esteemed colleagues.
Can I, this might sound like I'm not asking a question. It might sound like I'm making a comment, but I'm really asking a question. When I think about indirect spend, which Barbara, I agree with the definition. It's not that it's, I hear a lot of my colleagues saying the difficulty to get what the true indirect spend widgets and cost are. So, when you're in value analysis, when we're looking at bringing in products or services into the institution, we want to know what we currently are spending and both the dollar as well as the widget that are used for that, because then we also want to be able to marry up some clinical outcomes, right? Length of stay, with the mortality rates, readmission. But there can be some of those same factors in indirect, but I know I worked in an organization that struggled to truly be able to maximize what that indirect spend looked like. Now, I skipped over the definition, but I think Barbara did a good job of saying if you look at anything below the clinical area, that falls with most indirect activities that happen. But Jenell, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think one of the thoughts or one of the things that first comes to mind is like rentals and rental agreements and how it doesn't just necessarily fold into the value analysis process per se on should we bring this in, what's our, ROI, things of that nature. But value analysis is really the hub that holds all of the information. For example, some of these indirect costs are used when you start to assess capital. Should we purchase this capital? Is it worth it? What are our rental costs? What are our widget costs? What are the service agreements that are also included in there? Who's responsible for fixing? Who's responsible for upgrading? Oh, by the way, annually, this item, let's just say laser, has an annual upgrade that will cost X amount of dollars. So that also has to be figured into that indirect cost. So it's not necessarily we want to bring in, the red pen and just do a quick, high level analysis. You also have to get into what drives that red pen. And what drives that red pen is typically falls under those indirect costs because there are maintenance agreements, service costs, Another one that comes to mind is instrument repair. Mm-hmm. Repair versus replacement. So there's a lot of different, I think, layers of the onion when you start talking about indirect costs and how it's used and evaluated across multiple operational business aspects of healthcare.
So I'm just trying to help make this easier for my mind to wrap around this, and maybe I'm a little slow, but just think about it from general accounting principles. I'm viewing it almost from the perspective of a cost of goods sold. If a typical business selling a product, in this case, the healthcare provider, the hospital, their business, their widget that they're producing is healthcare. So the direct cost essentially would be the cost of goods, all the supply, the cost of the caregivers, et cetera, all of that in that top half of the accounting portion. And then indirect is essentially a below the line characteristic, which kind of goes into the just operating a good business and the operations of a good business. Is that a fair analogy?
It is, except the difference is when we're doing value analysis, we have to account for all of those things. And a few of those things actually wind up on operating budgets, not a different budget for the organization. Depends on where that, whatever it is. Like the instruments would fall under SPD or OR, and they would have to pick it up out of their operating fund. So you have to know where it lies in the ledger, in the account codes, and all of that. So you have to be part finance, or at least have a finance contact that can help you with all of those. Because people will say, well, it's not on my budget, it's just on the organization's budget. Well, you are the organization, so you really need to be cognizant of that.
So essentially what you're advocating here for, Barbara, just to bring it all to full speed, is the concept of those are still cost that value analysis through our process of doing an evaluation, looking at various points of care for this and points of cost, and potentially vetting numerous vendors for the same thing. All that should go through value analysis, just the same as the product being brought in through the OR.
Yeah, and or at least we have to be invited to those meetings and help with what you just said, lay it all out. So we have those questions to ask.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I don't want to overwhelm our value analysis colleagues to say, oh, you're adding on additional category of products, because indirect from a finance is exactly what you said, Skender. That is how the model is laid out. But we're talking about, I think, just to bring it down a little bit, is indirect in the supplier and the practice arena. So somehow it's going to be used to generate better outcomes for a patient too. And that's where we come involved. If somebody says, I am just going to do that, I think rentals is a perfect example. What Jenell said, I'm just doing a rental agreement because we're going to need this. But if the rental agreement only houses products that have already been vetted as non-acceptable clinically to purchase, then we don't want to, that's not a good rental agreement. The other thing is, if it's a rental agreement, we should be able to use the same structures that we use for evaluating other products and services into an organization to make sure we've got the best products and service provided. Because you do a rental, just an example, and great products, but it's going to take them 6 hours to get to any one of your locations. That's not the best agreement. There's nobody that's going to really accept that, right? They want things more current and more a shorter window of time to receive the products without storing them all in your facility. So see, there's where these are questions value analysis asks in general. What are the clinical outcomes? But also, how does product get to you? How does product get stored to you? All of those things that can be incorporated when we look at these type of indirect supplier products as well.
Is this a thing that typically could be variable in the definition and context from institution to institution, or do you see it as having some standardization, Jenell?
No, I think there is some variability. When you start talking about some indirect spend, it's not uncommon for organizations to kind of just stay with the same old. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We've used X courier for 25 years. It's the name we know. Hey, let's just go ahead and renew that contract. Well, without value analysis being involved in that, at least in the discussions, there may not necessarily go out and look for other like contractors who can meet some of the other I guess performance metrics that Terri was just talking about. You know, what's the time for courier? How far away are they? Is there another vendor that is close? We've been with, you know, I don't know, Joe's Heating and Repair for 20 years, but is Joe really giving us the best deal right now? As there's more competition in the market. And I guess to kind of flip the switch from couriers, when you talk about rentals and rental agreements and some of the organizations or the other partners or vendors that provide different rental agreements, you know, can they service your needs? Do they have to get it from another source, which then drives the cost? And what are their direct relationships also so that additional cost isn't passed on to your healthcare system? So there's a lot of different ways I think you can look at it. And I think that's why you see variability amongst organizations on truly what is an indirect cost and what is a direct cost. And it depends on where they're located and who they're currently contracted with. Is it a GPO agreement? I don't know. Is it, you know, do you go outside of that box and start looking for somebody different, or is it a specialty? So there's a lot of variation. Probably not the best answer to your question, but it's kind of Pandora's box a little bit.
I think the other thing that value analysis brings to those sorts of discussions within organizations is we understand who will be the most affected by some of these decisions. So I'm going to go back to the courier, because having spent 20 years in the laboratory, couriers was a big thing. And so when couriers came up after I was out of the lab and into supply chain and things, I go, okay, I know who to bring in from not just labs, but you've got other, you know, like pharmacy and a few other folks that need to be in there. So you start looking at what is your current courier doing compared to what your needs are. And Jenell said the magic word. Do we have metrics? Have they been being met? All of that. And then it's more of a RFP response type thing, and have all your goods and services listed with metrics, or looking at the GPO, whichever of that works for your organizations. But I told this to a group of people last year. If you're not looking internally at the contracts or non-contracts that you have across the board, start going back through all of that and don't leave any stone unturned, and you will find lots of value in doing the process we're discussing.
Hey, can I just add something? Because Jenell, what your comments triggered a lot of both of our thoughts.
I opened Pandora's box.
You did a little bit, but I think it was good, because the audience who's going to listen to this will be varied. But I wanted to just say this phrase, you know, I like little catch phrases. So value analysis, it's a trigger for change. So when you had talked about rentals and even wheelchair rentals or locally, the courier's a perfect example. If I get a good paycheck and I don't have to change anything for 20 years, why would I? And we challenge value analysis when they open any contract or product category that comes in. They're always saying, why should I be interested in this? Where are you going to go for the future? What's your roadmap look about? How are you going to enhance value for me? Because my purse has a bottom to it. And so I think that that's the other reason to have value analysis involved. They're definitely not the stakeholders necessarily. They're supporters. They're people that take processes and help to apply them to this product category. But these are some of the reasons. So a supplier part, the supplier who has indirect products and services that we've talked about here a little bit, it's a good place to start with value analysis. Because what Barbara said too, I'm always amazed at these two women, because they kind of open this little door and I say, yeah, I really agree with that. But what you were saying is, I would rather you called me and said, hey, I've got this product. It may not be in your category. And I can say it's not, but I know who's going to do the contract, or I know who may have an interest in that. Let me talk with them first and see if they want to meet with you, that type of thing. So that's part of the role of value analysis professionals also.
So being that this is and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's more driven towards service, right? It feels like there's a lot more service component to what we're talking about with the indirect. Is that incorrect? Because hearing everything you said, it sounded more service than widget based.
Yeah, and in fairness, I think that's because that's my reference is services, but that's just my lens, my view from what I worked on. I'm sure Barbara and Jenell may expand that differently. There is no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer of how you look at it. You have to look at it from what your organization looks like, right? So our jobs are to support the organization missions to achieve that. And my mission may be a little bit different than Barbara or Jenell's was. So that was just my focus, tend to be more on service-oriented types.
Well, for example, if it's like waste, but it's, say, our clinics, our regional clinics that are around. When you look at their spend, we saw this supplier, this different supplier, et cetera, et cetera. And when you actually could pull and look at the market in your region, you could find one supplier that could do both their regulated and regular waste rather than having, mom and pop and Joe and Sue and Mary and whatever all around. If you pull it all together, then you might meet some regulations that may not be met or new regulations coming up or whatever it is, and be under an umbrella that could be a big contract that might do also the base hospital or a few of the region hospitals as well. So it's being able to look at it from above and be that what if person, sort of throw the questions out about why and could we and that sort of thing, to Terri's point.
Are there times where the KPIs and value metrics aren't necessarily universal out there, where you're looking at some of these services and some of these things and you're saying, how do we properly evaluate this to determine if we want to put it out to multiple when it's not so universal? What happens then? And does that ever happen? I don't know.
Well,
It
does happen. I can get us started a little bit. One is it's on the responsibility of the organization to know what they need to do to comply with various government, regional, state, whatever it is, regulations and things, and to do it in a manner that's timely. If you're only open Monday through Friday, you've got to do something and have your metrics still meet other conditions that someplace may be open 24 hours a day. And how do you do that? And where do you do that? So you have to be cognizant.
Terri, Jenell, anything you want to go ahead, Terri?
I would just add to that is this identifying the metric to measure that this is effective and the product has value and service, no matter what category it is always hard. But that is truly a role of the user. In the majority of the areas we work, it's a clinical person. What are the outcomes you expect this product to achieve? Well, I expect it to look pretty. I'm being facetious. I don't mean that, but that is really hard. They'll say, well, I don't know. I want the patient to like it. Okay, well, how would you know if the patient liked it? Well, our job is to help them to funnel it down. It's not to make it for them. And in this category, I think Barbara and Jenell agree, we have to hold the suppliers responsible. You said you would be able to transport my product within a certain amount of time. So how are you going to track that? And I want us to review that in some kind of cadence, right? It may not be us reviewing it, but we may be the ones that start the question, we being value analysis, say, hey, what is it your service really is going to do? And that's both from a supplier and the provider. Now you get them both in the same room was, well, I really don't care about time. I would care if it's kept cold every time I measure it. Doesn't matter how long it keeps it there, whatever that be. Then they can both agree. And at the end of the day, when they review how successful they've been, they'll have the right tools to do that then.
Jenell?
Yeah, I think just kind of dovetailing onto what Terri said, there are minimal standards of expectation, regardless of what the service widget indirect cost is. And the key to finding that everything is measurable in some way, shape, or form, I think. And the key to finding out what that minimal standard of expectation is to sitting down with that value analysis professional, just like Terri said, and really dissecting it and bringing it, can you meet these expectations? And then the value analysis is talking to, the end user, and they're saying, yeah, you know what? Poor couriers. I'm just going to pick on them for just a second. We have a minimal requirement that we need to turn this lab result around in 12 hours, but it's taking them 4 hours to and from to get there. Therefore, our results are being delayed to our patients, and it's changing care. Well, that is a very clear measurable metric and a minimal standard expectation. So our expectation then, as we put together these contracts or help put together these contracts or search out other vendors who may be able to give us or to meet that minimal standard expectation, is okay, we require X, Y, and Z based on what the current problems are with the existing vendor. So you could say we require a 12-hour turnaround time, which means within 2 hours of notification, you need to pick up this specimen. It needs to be held at this temperature throughout, logged, so you can get very distinct, I think, in what that criteria is that should then go into that contract to keep everyone held accountable and liable. There's another, I think, thought process when you start thinking, well, why does value analysis really need to be included in some of these ancillary or indirect costs? And I think, to me, the answer is because that value analysis professional for that organization understands what the strategic goal and strategic roadmap looks like for the entire organization. That particular, let's say the lab, who has historically negotiated these contracts or these indirect, contracts by themselves, may not necessarily know that, the healthcare organization is looking to purchase XYZ down the road that is also going to affect their volumes, transit times, and all of these other things. So that's why, in my opinion, it's very important to engage and have those conversations with someone who fully understands and is privy to the information of the strategic growth of the organization that you're working for.
Would that be relevant, Jenell? I'm going to take something that's so benign as like valet services.
Sure.
Would that be different than just, whoever is responsible for facilities putting out an RFP to five different valet services in the local region? How would something as benign as that?
That's a great question. It may or may not have to exist on a singular contract. So depending on where the locations are that are requiring valet services, and then ancillary parking structures, or, depends, metropolitan areas are a little bit of a struggle with that, where they also have to rent out adjacent parking lots and things of that nature. Are they included? Is there a company that can provide both? Do you have to get the parking lot from one and the valet, the actual services, from another? What are their insurance requirements? What do they have for insurances? What are their liabilities? What are their workers' comp? So there's a lot of different things that need to go into the consideration rather than just the service or item itself.
Because
I thought I was going to trip you up on that one.
Oh, no.
Great job.
No,
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that.
No, my first question was, sounds good, but do you need it? You got a bunch of people already in your building.
Or we need that. Have you thought about this? We need that.
Yeah. Well, the first thing to go is parking spaces.
Yeah.
And so people spend a lot of time going around and around garages and trying to find, and when your appointment is so important. And we're thinking of the patient and their families, having someone say, I'll take that car for you. It's like a breath of fresh air. I don't have to worry about it, but you need the the company that has the best track record and indemnity and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, we've all worked on these types of projects. So yeah, see if you can find one to sort of trick us up. But I was gonna say that in addition, we don't want internal departments such as facilities doing it on their own, because you start going around supply chain in general, then you start getting into not having maybe good objective contracting practices. Maybe you're going to be held accountable by a board at your institution or a state board, and you need to be above the board and be able to do those things correctly. So by going through supply chain, whether it's at a different corporate entity or each hospital or whatever, at least you're going to be following. But it's good to have value analysis in the conversations, no matter what it is, and being able to look at that goods and services section and make sure nothing's being left out. So again, it's pulling all those key people together.
I just would build on that value analysis does not replace your legal department. They do not replace other parts of supply chain, purchasing, ordering, that type of thing, or in the service that's provided. That's not our job. Our job is processes and to make sure that the services, products and services we get within the organization meet the overall goal. I think we've all said it now, and mission of the organization that we're working for, that we're supporting at that period of time. And the suppliers can just help us tremendously by just, hey, knocking on the door. Because valet service, somebody says, hey, I got a great valet service. And I would say, wow, we don't even use that here. Or what we use is totally different and it's internal. And so it's great, but I wouldn't knock on this door. There's another organization you probably should go to, that kind of thing. It just helps them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So is there anything else that we didn't touch upon for indirect spend that we want to impart on the audience?
I think Terry touched on it, but I wanted to emphasize something a little bit more. For example, if somebody, say, in imaging is using certain pieces of equipment internally, and maybe it's not a big capital piece of equipment, but it's something integral, they might do, and Jenell mentioned this when we were just chatting before we went on air, called placement agreements. Someone may think it's in their purview, that it's out of my budget. I'll just sign a placement agreement where something's just going to be put here and I just pay for it out of my budget. So why would I need to have anything looked at or whatever? First of all, signature authorities and stuff set aside, is if you're having something placed, it might not be to your specifications, or it might be substituted at any particular piece of time. So you have to know all of the questions to ask if something's just going to be placed there. And just because your budget is paying for it doesn't mean that all of that is actually going to happen the way, and then you're going to come to supply chain and say, hey, this all fell apart. You need to fix it, when we didn't create it or didn't have some eyes on
it. And Jenell, I think it looked like you were going to say something too.
No, just kind of, it just made me think of one thing I worked on where the department in particular executed a placement agreement, and no harm, no foul, or so they thought. And then the piece of equipment came and it actually required specialty cabling, they had to break into the wall essentially. So it required specialty like breakers in the electrical system. Long story short, required OSHPD permitting, which actually cost an additional $15,000 that was not thought of beforehand because it wasn't fully vetted.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess my word to the wise, I guess, is that, the value analysis professional at the organization has, I would say 9.9 times out of 10, sat on some kind of committee that has dealt with almost every kind of scenario that can be thrown at them. And there's always some little nuggets of wisdom there that, have you thought about? And if the answer is yes, great, let's get it included in this. So now we know it can also be used as a bargaining chip, maybe, because we know it's going to require OSHPA permitting, but you want to charge us $3,000 per procedure for a click fee for this. Wait a minute. Now we're starting to rack up some dollars that it no longer applies for operational budget and has to go through a capital process, even though it's a placement agreement. Or if there's an associated disposable, let's negotiate on that a little bit, because you can't have your cake and eat it too. We're paying for this, and this. We'll pay our fair share, but something's got to give here. So, and I think some of those hard discussions aren't always had at that departmental level.
No, you lose your leveraging power too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they've agreed that, or the supplier already knows that you're going to take a offer of costing you $3,000 a widget, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're not going to come down. Why would they? They already know that you committed to this price. Now you've lost all your leverage that you'd have to negotiate with them, and for the other factors that are involved in it. So I think it's just important to think a parting word I would have is indirects are thought of, we just buy them. Just everybody's used perfect examples that we just get them. It's not a big deal. Why are you looking at it? But it can really impact the organization from both its ability to achieve its mission and goals, its ability to provide patient satisfaction, cost effectiveness. And it could be a simple question that comes to a value analysis professional who just says, hey, it's not something we use here, or it's a great idea, but it's going to have to go through this route, help to drive them so they can be efficient and effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Terri, thank you for sharing that. So last 2 points, Barbara, do you want to go next and rounding us out?
Sure. I want to go back to my point that I was making about really not thinking that something has to have more sort of structure to it, some decision, even if it's something like office products like a chair. There are policies like fire stuff that have to go with it. So value analysis also has to be cognizant, at least to ask questions. Are there, I'm going to go back to it, the federal or other regulations that we have to comply to? And sure, this chair looks wonderful, looks comfortable, it'll go in a patient's room, but if it's flammable or can't be cleaned and you can get infections from it and things, the great price you got and it's good looking, it isn't going to fly with things. So you have to be cognizant, and value analysis is very aware of all these different particular avenues that we have to check and double check in order to protect our patients and our staff and our hospitals.
Thanks, Barbara. Jenell.
I agree with everything my esteemed colleague said. I think by engaging value analysis early in the indirect process, it can be a win-win. Mm-hmm. So for a supplier, vendor, or whatever term you want to put on it, by engaging that value analysis, you may actually generate more business than you fully intended. You may have gone in intending 1 or 2 facilities, and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, did you know we're purchasing X, Y, and Z 20, 25 miles away that is now going to be under our umbrella? We need to bring them into the fold. So it can also create win-wins, as well as I think Barbara and Terri have said it multiple times wonderfully, bringing the right people to the table. Oh, by the way, there is a regulatory, there's a regulatory consideration. We need to bring in infection control. Have you talked to them? Nope. Here's the name and number. I'll introduce you via email, and just kind of bringing everybody together. So it's a full, complete project and not just transactional.
I would just like to add one other thing is we've done, all three of us have done value analysis for a long period of time. And so sometimes in my head, I'm thinking, am I making this easy? Do I sound like it's just easy when I know it's not? I know for the value analysis professionals, because the audience here varies who will listen to this podcast. I'm hoping that we'll have value analysis colleagues or hospital supply providers participate, as well as the suppliers and the manufacturers participating in it. But for the value analysis person, no, we all started at square one too. The three of us did, and we used our internal resources, which is phone a friend. So I know Barbara and I and Jenell, all three of us have been on phone calls with each other at different times or on emails at different times through our career to say, am I crazy? And you know what they both say to me, probably. But I just think it's important that I don't want people to think it's not easy. We know it's hard, but you have resources, just like the supplier. If you're running into a value analysis person and you can tell they're not quite clicking yet, have them call one of us or have the supplier call one of us. Just, you're not alone type of thing. Nobody should be alone, blah, blah, blah.
No singing on this.
I was just going to ask, you going to break out into song? Like,
I just might.
all by myself. There you go. Break it down. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
really
ladies,
just start
thank you.
singing that song.
It was the first song that came to mind. It just sounded appropriate.
I think we should sing happy birthday to the clinical exchange. You want to sing us happy birthday for your anniversary here that you've got coming up? Yes. He froze.
Oh,
He froze, so we'll carry on because we got him in a good smile in his pose.
yeah.
So I think we've kind of explained indirect from A to Z. It can be complicated, but if you involve value analysis, they can be really helpful. And if you like what you heard, please share, subscribe to Value Analysis Expert Series, and have a good evening.
See you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.